That's perfect.
Yeah.
Nancy, thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you. And just Jennifer, thank you so much. And Andrea, Alan, Michael, and my colleagues. It's really wonderful. Sheree, thank you so much. So this really is informal. I am a philosopher in the midst of you dancers and performers. And I've been thinking much of my life about emotions. In fact, we have a guest here whose former partner was a former teacher thinking about ancient emotions, so it's lovely. And I want to think a little bit about emotional expression in dance, beginning really with modern dancers, and we'll see how this works. So modern dance was born as a radical reaction to the formal decorum and limited lexicon, in a sense, of ballet. And ballet may have provided consummate exterior work, but to the pioneers of dance, it was at the cost of disconnecting inside from out. And so they all had a sense in which they were unmasking the inner and pressing out. Expression's a term, I think it occupies about 2 pages of the OED, second edition at least, and so it means a lot of things. But a lot of them thought the genuine thing it means is to press outward, and I want to critique that at least. So the idea was greater transparency. Here is Isadora Duncan, and this is so severe, Wigman, and of course Martha Graham, and Doris Humphrey. Really gorgeous picture there. And Humphrey, were also into the Oriental and the exotic. But they still had this same idea that it had to come out from in, so inside to outside. And I want to just think about that philosophically a bit. I don't think that theory makes much sense. I mean, sometimes that's how we express, but I don't think all the time. And sometimes we vent, we clench our fists, etc., and we do it when we're in the presence of felt anger. But not always. Sometimes we make a point to do it, and we don't necessarily feel what we show. And so you might say, and this was a view around the time I was at Harvard, that forget about expression, talk about exemplification. That was Nelson Goodman in his theory of art. And in the sense that art expresses, but in the sense that it's an example of what it's showing. But I want to hold on to the idea of expression. I think it's just too much a part of our language, and it's a part of all different kinds of theories that are increasingly getting unsiloed, and that to my mind is really excellent. So what I want to do is draw on that wider thing, and again, this is really just the beginning. Think about expression in a wider sense than just aesthetic theory or as the modern dancers were thinking. So, but generally, I think of expression as making visible, perceptible, audible, touchable, philosophers like the term, epistemically accessible, available for knowledge. Properties, here sentient qualities such as emotions without necessarily at that moment feeling them. So obviously performers have a lot to say here, and I'm very keen to hear about that. And okay, with that as caveat, what I want to do is present the modern view a little bit, critique it, and then show how the push to emotional expression outward was a reaction to too much outer patina and manners in ballet, and in a military influence of ballet, as Jennifer's shown us so well. And I want to then develop an idea of working in the outside, where there's a kind of signaling and responsiveness and communication that emotion is. Okay, so the idea was, really Graham put it well, I think. She wanted to register interchange, make visible the interior landscape. Those were her words. If representation was about a mirror representing the outer world, let's represent the subjective world, was the idea. Now, dance is really well suited to this because we are already sentient creatures. If we're expressing sentience, then unlike art, painting, or music, you don't have to reach for some, to my mind, slightly cockamamie theories of resemblance or contour. The music has the contour of a human expression, or in the case of some have said there's really a persona, an imagined persona that's always behind the music that is carrying the emotional log that you perceive, or audience arousal. How arousing am I getting you right now would be the criteria of my emotional expression. Dance is easier because you're already a dynamic human being and you can put it in your body in a way that's very natural. But there are worries, or if that's not a puzzle itself, how you express, leaping too far, you might say, is a worry, and I think the modern dancers did this. So a few things that they weren't doing. It's often said if you show your guts, you let it out, you're talking about a hydraulic pump system. This is Descartes, actually. And that is, you're venting, you're letting off steam, almost like I had one of these radiators recently, the steam radiators that constantly, maybe New York City apartments have, hiss and spit, and as if they're going to burst under pressure. That's sometimes a way expression theory of emotion is thought. I think that's not what the dancers have in mind, modern dancers. I also don't think it's involuntary leakage. Seneca is the best on this, and he calls these they're proludentia pathea. They're sort of preludes to emotions, and they're proto-emotions. And he has this great motley list that include trembling, sexual excitement, spontaneous singing incited by an upbeat tempo, shivering, recoiling at the touch of icky things, a sudden glint in the eye at a dangerous object, and so on. And they're not full-fledged emotions, but if you don't nip them in the bud, says the Stoic sage, you'll be in the midst of a really big emotional episode that you want to hold back on. And I don't think that's what Graham was up to, but I hear Jen has this wonderful phrase from Lincoln Kirstein that he scoffed her as her dancing was a cross between shitting and belching. And if she were doing, or they were doing only that, that would be the kind of the involuntary eruptions. I think that the dancers were really trying to articulate, clarify, explore, make concrete the fine texture and changing contours of emotions. It would be hard to express in ballet, my limited ways of exploring it. Grief, lamentation, longing, shame, guilt, psychological anguish, jealousy, betrayal, but also joy in life. If you think of, I was watching recently, Adorations, that's sort of a technique class that Graham gives. It's really wonderful. And also Diversions of Angels, just about falling in love and tenderness represent different colors. So there's a lot of torso movements, as you know, core, angularity, flat shapes, cupped hands, flat hands, the pull of gravity, a chesty sternum, that weren't really being shown in European ballet. And for Lamone, it was also that men could dance and not just lift, and that was a big deal. It was really, in that regard, it's a new human vocabulary, a new, that he thought, I think, male physicality, male psyche. Let's see if I can get some of those Lamone. I mean, really wonderful, and I'm not going to show these right now, but the more is move on. And also, we have it here. There's lament for, we might just see just a tiny second. Okay, what do you think? I'm going to go. So this does have a poem. It's a poem, but it's a lot of percussive stuff. And you don't have to hear the poem, a lament for a bullfighter dance, to sort of pick up the bullfighter jests, but also a mourning, and it kind of moves on. Yeah, it's amazing. This is Jacob's Pillow credit. Okay, so now let's get back to the slide. So One piece I want to look at is steps in the street. Well, let me just, you probably, this is one that's familiar to many, lamentation. But if we, there she is
It's
herself.
the tragedy that obsesses the body, and the garment that is worn is just a tube of material.
Just a jersey, whoops, let's see. Forgive me, I think it's the next one. This is all new tech. Annie taught me some of this, and then I got bookmarked, then one of my assistants helped me bookmark. So this is a reconstruction 35 or so, steps in the street. Some of the movements are amazing, I think. Mary Fisher, I believe, did a reconstruction, as part of the NYU thesis, actually. It's so grand. And it's so sideways and angular. And the music was not preserved, so they've reconstructed a lot. So you should, what's the mise en scène, the setting here? Hard ground contraction. And very simple garb, and it's women warriors. They're all women, they're at war. They're at war after, it's a Spanish Civil War. And it's, of course, Guernica, is what's in the mind of many. Lamont and Graham were very much rallying to the support of the Republic under Franco, being attacked by Franco. And this, I think, more than many things I've seen, gets the women chorus, the Greek women chorus, women who are in the after wars, or what I read about, and who really are not ever part of the proportionality calculus. What happens at home is, there's another bookmark there. Let's see if we can put it on. Oh, there it is. Look, I need to check that. It's really dramatic. So, limited, but visceral, very visceral. And just to remind you, that was the back set of the period in history. And that's a grab, that's an iconic image, I'm sure. This is Neo-Assyrian, you've seen these at the British Museum, in Yale, there's Art Gallery. I don't know how to say it, so I never say it right. Ashurbanipal, I don't know where the accent is. But you see that sideways pounding, but it's not men, it's women, and I think that's an important statement. And it's not going to war, it is at home, it's what's left at home. And I think she got that. I think that's very hard to get in other ways. Others can tell me what ballets are like that, but this really set tone. It did important work. So just something about the grand contraction. It also has history. There's a certain version of it. And that is, the idea, of course, we now know is if you contract with an inhalation, or is that an inhalation? An exhalation, you tighten your core and abdomen, and if you expand, the musculature, the neuromusculature, and the skeleton allow you to flatten out, do lots with your core, and it goes right out to your extremes. But there is a lineage here, which is rather interesting, because I study ancients and the Stoics. The Stoics have the idea of the pneuma, your breath, as being like the neurotransmitter of emotions. And emotions were many things, but amongst them, they were appraisals of threats, of goods and bads in the offing out there, threats and things that would affect your well-being. But materially, it was your pneuma that got your breath expanded and contracted. They literally talk about swellings, shrinkings, and cowerings, expansions. And that, I think, kind of captures what she was doing. Now, your material, that's a material enabler of movement. It's not itself the movement. It's not itself the emotion making itself known. It's an enabler. It's a material enabler that's a substrate, you might say. And it frees the body to do lots of things. I think, she was thinking it was itself what you're showing, the emotion that you're showing. But we sort of have to remember, I think, that emotions are often on the outside. Philosopher's favorite example, the St. Bernard dog. It has the configuration and the look. And there you got it. She's doing it for me. Involuntarily. Lisa. It's got the meand, the lines, we say. The line of sadness. Is the dog sad? Probably not. But some philosophers say, let's talk about expressive for that, the line, the configuration. And we'll reserve expression for when it's a whole package inside and out. I don't think you have to go there because I don't think expression has to be some congruent feeling you're always feeling when you're expressing the emotion. But anyway, there's that. But I'm reminded of it because people do talk about the back of the dance or the line, the race. If you see Mr. Gaga, there's one of the teachers saying he has this supine, sinewy, long back, a Mideastern back that allows him to undulate. And maybe. But he does a lot with it as well. It's not just the back. So I think also we have to remember that emotion is can work outside in as well as inside out. And there's a very famous experiment, hard to reduplicate right now, they say, but I often do this in my class. So you have the funnies, you're reading the comics, and this side of the class holds the pen like this. And this side, hold. So these are downturned muscles, and these are upturned muscles. And this is Stratford Strack, and the experiment is supposed to, it seems to show, but again, it's just been questioned with reproduction, whether it reproduces the results accurately. The class that has the upturned zygotic muscles turned up seems to find the funnies funnier than the pouting faces. So I lead you to look at this. But there's, I think, there's a cost, and it's certainly not a necessary condition that when you express, you have to feel the same thing inside. I'd love to hear from the performer shortly on this. But Peter Bausch is as expressive as it comes, and you can almost, and in talking to a dancer in town who has worked with and interviewed the company members, it's intense. And some don't last very long. And I would almost think of it as like it's almost a boundary violation. Inside, I don't mean inside, outside, but I mean when you're in dance and when you're not is very permeated. And I'm reminded here of Zimbardo's experiments, the famous prison experiments where you divide the class, fascist and non-fascist. And the experiments had to stop because people took on the roles so seriously. If you watch Rites of Spring for a bit, let's see if I get it up. Just move it further. So I told you. Yeah, go. Isn't as dramatic as Cafe Mueller. We're seeing to that. Okay, now here we go. Let's see if that's the one bookmark. I should just let yeah. Let me stop it. So this I found very disturbing watching. And in interviewing some of the dancers, they said the line often between moving from love and hate or love and anger while dancing with her could go just flip very quickly. So you see it's getting more abusive, the representation is getting more abusive. And so on. Here how it's resolved. It's difficult. So that's one form of expression, and there are those very close to this, and I'd love to hear more. But you know, I would think if you were dancing in this company, you'd have to really guard against traumatization and re-traumatization. And these are tropes. They're asked to go places, to feel things, to bring things back in order to be able to do that. And these are not sweet Madelines that Proust conjures up. These are very difficult places to go. So we've been sort of thinking about emotion is communicative, I think. It doesn't have to just be bubbling up from inside out. And this is just part of our ordinary practice. So I remind you, sometimes we think about managing emotions, putting a lid on them. I was listening to Daniel Deronda, or reading Daniel Deronda. He coaches himself in a moment of unbridled exuberance, or I think it's from Mira Lapidov. I have my hands on the rein and I shall not drop them. He wasn't talking about his horse, he was talking about this, not letting it all out. And so sometimes we come to feel what we don't yet feel, we nurse it from outside in. Sometimes we show it in order to meet normative expectations, or we exaggerate in order to really make sure that you got it. And here, now I have to give credit where credit is due. So Annie Cersei's, we're chatting about this, and her dad, she says, oh, my dad works on this in signaling. He does animal evolution. And so an example that's in that literature that my graduate students have used a lot, but I didn't know one of the sources, is the mating signal of the peacock. And the peacock has a huge train, and that's a very expensive asset to have to strut around with. It's a great cost. And the reason that they have that at great cost is just sort of a survival test. If I can make it with it, I'm really impotent. I got stuff to show. I can strut my stuff. I'm a catch. And so it's called handicapping. But the point is that that peacock may be very potent, but he's got to make sure in a very exaggerated way that you get the signal. And probably in a somewhat deceptive way. So it's common that drill sergeant, you can help us out, may or may not be angry, but he's sure effective. He's getting people to believe that he's angry, and he's putting a lot of fear in people's minds. And a price they pay if you don't do what is being asked of you. It's part of the social science literature. For a while I was studying children, and I was watching, there's a whole literature on social referencing. Children want to know, how should I view the stranger at the door that's coming in? And parents have to show in their face, friend or foe. And the parent isn't necessarily feeling very smiley or anything, but she's got a, friend through the face smile. So the children learns how to self-regulate and approach things. So there's a lot of affective communication. The parent may be feeling incredibly tired of stranger anxiety after 2 years or a year of it, but she's doing it as a signal. I was thinking about this example, thinking about United Airlines this weekend. There's a very famous study by Arlie Hochschild on airline stewards and stewardesses on emotional labor. The airline attendants show smiles. They are not necessarily feeling happy to see you, as we know. They are exchanging a pleasantry that's part of their emotional labor. And these are often called Duchenne smiles. In a Duchenne smile, you get the Mona Lisa, but you also get the, I can't say it well, the orbicularis oculi. The eyes go up as well. They cringe. There's crow's feet right here. Our friend on the right does not have that. But that's not a great picture, but Mr. Obama does. His eyes are usually crinkled. The orbicularis oculi muscles. I have to hear if this is studied in anatomy or not. So there's a lot of communication, external communication going on, and that brings us to thinking about dance in the military. I began thinking about this, thinking about Seneca again, Roman Stoic, who says that if you're going to be kind, you better think about the person you're passing to. It's a call and response. Don't just show it, but show it in a way where it can be caught. And he says, I'd like to take up an analogy which our own Chrysippus drew of the game of ball. It falls to the ground through the fault either of the person throwing it or the person receiving it, while it only remains passing by properly being thrown to a tall partner high, to the low partner low. And it has to be tossed differently. And then he brings in dance. And he talks about the graces, the 3 graces. And he says, essentially he's talking about legato transitions. In kindness, but the indigenous territory is dance, and then he moves the metaphor to kindness or benefactions. And what's the point of their holding hands in a dance that goes back on itself? There's a sequence of kindness passing from one hand to another, which comes back nonetheless to the giver, and that the beauty of the whole is lost if anywhere interrupted. So it's the idea of smooth transitioning that's really going on here. And of course, we know it from that kind of more dynamic painting. And so dancers, of course, have idiosyncratic shapes, sizes, even if they're selected and groomed to fit with a company's brand. But they still have, you might say, the pas de trois is this amazing call and response. You're signaling through orientation, space, proprioceptive awareness, perceptual awareness, where you are. And they're just not, am I in the right place? I mean, you dancers can help me out more, but it's also the indigenous imagery of passing is also, the metaphor holds for dance. It's a trust response. It's a trust back and forth. Can I count on you? Are you there? Did you pick up do you see where I am? Is the timing right? Are you attuned? Is it smooth? And so that's very much a signaling to someone else. But it's also, remember, you're also thinking about the audience. And here Plato, I think, is terrific in the Aeon. He's talking about rhapsoding, I believe is the word, being Homer. And Aeon's reciting Homer or telling Homer. I look down at them every time from high up on the rostrum, this is the audience, and they're crying and looking terrified as the stories are told. And they're filled with amazement. He says, he's talking to Socrates, you see, I must keep my wits and pay close attention to the audience. For if I start them crying, I'll laugh as I take their money. But if they laugh, I shall have to cry at having lost money. So I mean, he's got audience uptake in mind. So the early ballet builds on this idea of expression as kind of communicative transactions. How am I doing on time?
105.
Okay, so good. 5 to 10 minutes. sort of a system of emblematic body movements that have their origin in a ritualized social code of etiquette. I think here, actually interesting, is I think he's an anthropologist, and his name is David McNeil. He studies hands, hand gesture, gesticulation. He's sort of the Ekman of hands, you might say. And so historically, we might say class roles, statuses, and rank are observed, deferred to, and respected in balletic movement, paid due reverence to, in their language, in much the way that height and skill are in Seneca's game of catch. The movements are an address of sorts, signaled to a receiver. And here, just really briefly, this is a, whoops, we'll move to that. This is a direct grab from Jennifer, who's worked so wonderfully on this. The Ballet du Corps and Louis XIV were essentially making move between martial arts and ballet. And as she says, ballet was the pivot on which, etiquette was the pivot on which La Belle Dance turned. And how you moved your head, if you look at someone directly in the eye. If you're of high birth, you have one kind of move. Homier, if you're, well, this I have to read because you say it so well, Jennifer. How to cross through the center of the room if you're noble blood, how to pass obsequiously to the side if you're a bastard. The king's ritual levee, as she writes in Apollo's Angel, was choreographed movement where courtiers stood like an obedient corps de ballet, serried ranks to hand the king his shirt or wipe his bottom. So, and the stage was a way to strut your stuff, to magnify your potency, if you like, in the way a peacock might. It gave you a rostrum on which to perform and show the potency of state. So, in something you quote, Louis XIV, art of dancing is most advantageous and useful to our nobility and to the other people who have the honor of approaching us, not only in time of war in our armies, but also in time of peace in our ballets. And a ballet master would go out and deploy in excursions to make sure that the drills and dance movements were still being kept up. And that's not lost on current ballet. Lincoln Kirstein called the American Ballet, School of American Ballet, the West Point of dance. And he was a monument man. He served, he had gone to the war. He was preserving monuments at great cost. That is not that the monuments weren't at great cost, the Palmeiras of that generation, but that he would slither down mines. He was sapping them, diffusing mines, and then using the best intel efforts to make a getaway without getting detected. I mean, this was human intel of high sort at risk to living in harm's way, definitely. And he sort of was thinking about this, I think, in Balanchine. I was doing some research at the library, and Balanchine apparently, you'll know this better than I do, at age 9 was rejected by the Imperial Dancing Academy. The quota was filled, and so, as Kirsten said, he swapped a anchor on his lapel for a gilded lyre of Apollo. Yes, and right, exactly, the military, I'm sorry, at the Royal, at the Imperial Russian Naval Academy. He didn't try out for Army, but he went rather to the Dancing Academy. And so, and Kirstein says, dance was and is a career comparable in usefulness, prestige, security, and diplomatic power to the military. And I think he thought that. And so, here's West Point. And Edward Villela taught at West Point in the, in the 80s, off-season conditioning bodies, as the coach there says. We understand that that maybe sometimes the principle that a ballet dancer's upper and lower bodies must perform altogether different motions at the same time is also true of a quarterback, and so we welcome Villela coming there. But it's not just physical. And this is sort of interesting and sort of where my heart is, be all you can be, that's the Army motto. I think Kirstine Balanchine probably, although I'm no student of Balanchine, they really thought of themselves as dedicated to the ideals of service. Certainly Kirstine thought of himself as an ambassador. He went to South America with the troops, with the Corps. And they thought of themselves in the service of the good and the beautiful, to be Platonic here, or ancient. And this comes up in this remark, a young ballet dancer auditioning, the mother says, will she dance? To Balanchine, famously, and the answer is, la danse, madame, c'est une question morale. Now, that's very haughty, and there's a lot of auteur, but I think, you know, in its best light, it's aspirational hope. Aristotle has this in the beginning of Nicomachean Ethics. I hope your child will flourish, he says. He doesn't mean, let luck be on your side, let it fall to the gods. I think it really means only time will tell, but I hope and like you aspire on behalf of your daughter that she will have the talent and discipline and receptivity as well as good luck to create the beauty of the art form in her body. I think that's the best read of that kind of remark. And that's a very noble instantiation in your body of, you know, or through the idea of aspiring on someone's behalf. Now there's a less noble side to all that. With sacrifice comes high moral cause, less, you know, and Stoicism very quickly can deteriorate into self-denial, eating disorders. The line between resilience and trauma is often very, very thin. I think that's true of services and ballet. So, thinking about this commingled history, ballet's expressive language rooted in gestural communication of respect for office and rank, and showing that you know your place, and showing others that you can be counted on and trusted, and letting others know you can reliably do your part. That has a military idea. Famously in the military, you signal the office. You salute the office. You never salute a person. Whatever your views are, you're saluting the office. You're saluting rank. You keep the rest quiet. And so in a sense, your signal isn't what you're feeling. It's about communicating something else, communicating station. You're a performer. You're not necessarily being authentic. And you give up some ego, hopefully you don't give up your moral conscience here, and you put on the uniform and become part of the cadre. And I think there's similarities with dance. There's Union Jack in Scotland, which is still part of the Union here. But also Stars and Stripes, both sides of the ocean. The idea that they're collectives. These are cadres, corps, collectives, where individuals enact trust rituals of the sort suggested earlier. And you can think of them as call and response interactions, what might call be received. There's intimacy on stage, but not necessarily off. And a lot of very subtle figuring out of others' moods, places, and feelings. So similarly, battle buddies train for months together to build unit cohesion and physical intimacy and synchronies. Many tell me that they're family tighter than families at home. They know each other's farts. They sleep spoon together for warmth downrange. And you know, they carry each their back. And when the saluting, all that is a sort of a way, the tipping of the head cover, things you see in ballet, the balletic motions, passing just at the right distance on a parade field. All those, I think, are ways of showing station and status, but also ways of saying, I'm together, we'll do this together, that sort of thing. And the stakes are higher for warriors typically than for dancers, but they're both responsive to signals. So I'm just going to wrap up. Not all dance is emotional expression, some is just amazing shapes and forms. And so you might say emotional expression doesn't do a good job of explaining that. And you might say, let's go back to exemplification. But there's still a lot of emotions being expressed here somewhere. They're just not focal, they may be peripheral, and that's talking about exemplification doesn't really do it. So just my last thoughts is, modern dance was really of the era of Freud. It's depth psychology that's of sort. Let the inside out. And, and get rid of, big months at it, get rid of that repression and civilized veneer and show what you're really feeling. Show the depths. But, psychodynamic space has moved on. And that is, a lot of it is in the room now. How are people interacting, sort of work you do here and now, and what are they feeling, what are they showing? Not dredging up their past necessarily. And transferences, projections, communications, enactments that reveal if we're attuned or not attuned to ourselves, but also to others. And for insight into these kinds of communications and dance, I think lessons from the Ancien Regime and ballet's origins in the court and battlefield are worth remembering. Thank you. So, yeah, please. You are very much in my mind as I talk.
The one thing that, and this was terrific, thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Really, there's so much to think about here, and the one thing I wanted to ask you about sort of right off the bat is abstraction.
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 Yeah.
Because, it seems to me there's another, I agree with everything you said about the sort of difference between the psychological modern dance, this expressionistic sort of view of human emotion and how you get it out.
Right.
And then this kind of alternate balletic world, which has often been criticized for being unemotional, cold, somehow detached, ornamental. But as you say, there's some way in which, I think one of the things that Valentine Christie went after in service and the whole military relationship is absolutely central and key. But it's how do you take emotion and abstract it and show the abstract emotion in movement? So there's a little bit, it's almost got also a religious aspect because it's like the angels who don't suffer, they show suffering, but don't suffer.
Yeah.
Which goes back to your point about are they actually feeling it? Or do you actually feel it? And so I'm interested in your view.
Yeah.
It's not organized.
Well, aesthetically, the formal ballet is exquisite, and as Heather was saying in your work, you couldn't imagine those shapes. It's just aesthetically gorgeous, and so the aesthetics, I think, is in the shape, the configuration. So some would say, forget the term expression if it's going to make you think about emotions. Just think about an exemplification that represents something. It represents a geometry. It represents ways of moving in space. But the idea that there's still a higher cause, which I think is background to this, that could be, it could not be central, but it could be peripheral, not focal, but peripheral. Philosophically, the more I think about this, I'm not a philosopher of mind. This is what philosophers of mind worry all the time about. What is consciousness? If I talk about experience, who thinks my experience is blue if I see a blue object? No one in their right mind thinks that their experience is blue. That's an idiotic thought. It's sort of my experience is blue? No, I'm experiencing blue, and the object out there is blue, but I'm not. My phenomenal state is not anything called blue. And it could be that emotion is like that in some way too. The modern dancers, the more I look at it, it can be very boring, but they were in your kishka, they just got it hard, fast. And you probably have to feel something, but it doesn't have to be the same emotion. You have to, and I would think you dancers know better than I, how you could remember all that if you come home from it, or you go on stage after an upsetting evening. You're like the distracted driver. You got a lot of other shit on your mind, and the best thing you can do is just get the steps out and not project yourself into something. But Lisa can help us with these sorts of thoughts. But so I think some of it, the forms are definitely aesthetic. They move an audience in ways that are unbelievable. And they were going after that. So there's audience arousal and aesthetic appreciation of really novel things. It wasn't, I don't think they had to be expressing lamentation or grief in the way that like this moved inside and out in a purple robe too. So a different kind of thing, but I think we should question the idea that when we show an emotion, the thing that we're feeling inside is something just like that. I think dancers, if anyone, know the language of embodiment is so rich. It's probably so much richer than anything you could possibly feel inside. Or at least it's a different language. Yeah, Lisa.
Just I was thinking there that the dancers embody a bigger body than the subjective emotion of the person. And in that way, I feel the abstraction and the responsibility to represent a kind of consciousness is very Kettine in that way, that you're paring away the subjectivity and opening yourself, which is almost religious, to something greater. And I think only something like dance can liberate you in that way, or that's where I feel the synergies with Beckett. But I think the emotions that you're expressing there are broader and therefore
Or spiritual, or
spiritual, but
and just
probably better expressed through abstract movement than necessarily linking it to a biographical or personal, smaller, intricate expressions of emotion, that they're encapsulated and expressed in grander, the group responsibility to the whole. There's some of the things I was just thinking there, and what's different there when you think about it as a performer as you approach it. What the responsibility is the performer, and why it's so different to perform a dance or let's say traditional theatre acting, the performances.
yes,
You
it's
talk. Sorry.
Can I just ask, please, whether, do you think that, does that mean that the words are kind of abstract in their own way? I mean, I don't mean to keep using that word, but, you know, I'm thinking about some of the way you talk about lamentation and grief, it's more insensitive to label on, whereas I think some of the other kinds of emotions that come out of different, more external, right, you're not feeling inside and expressing it, is something that doesn't necessarily.
I think there's a combination of both, because you have to make the personal universal. In order to do that, you open yourself up for the kind of secrets which give you that kind of vocabulary, you know. But then to use that vocabulary, I think the tone and the musicality, we were talking about phrasing earlier, and that those sort of disciplines, and something that you have to be very aware of as, let's just say my own experience with Beckett and how, where I take my experience as a dancer into Beckett is, and where it's surplus to requirements when I try and take that into other work, and that's something that made me very convinced about this is a very different art form, and is the broader, is the macro spirit, the macro language of the piece itself, the bigger emotions, the tonality, the responsibility with movement and change and phrases within that.
kind of meta,
Word.
the kind of meta emotions, or
Yeah.
sort of global sense that kind of overlays on them.
Yeah, and you have to be open to that abstraction, although that abstraction is very specific. Does that answer your question?
You were talking about the Graham contraction, and I
Yeah.
don't do Graham technique. I studied a lot of it as a young dancer, and in fact, Francesca's mom was one of my legendary Graham teachers. But, you know, grief, but also laughing and crying. It's the seat of willpower and emotion. It's fight or flight.
Yes,
You
very
know,
much
it
so.
contains so many chakras from South Asian culture, you know. So there were many, many things to sort of get from that, to pull from that. But
And I think that was a source, you know.
Yeah.
The Buddhism, I mean, she didn't know anything about Buddhism, but certainly, I think Dennis Shawn, you know, was the way in through the Eastern
But,
stuff.
you know, I go back to this abstraction thing. I want to be a humanist, to make dances about what it's like to be a human being, right? Like Jose and Martha and all that stuff. She was maybe not so human, but I have the abstract, I mean, human concern, but in a mythological kind of context. I make pure movement, music-driven dances, and then I make these dances which are what I would call implied narratives. I'm not imitating scenes from life. I'm not interested in telling a story, but there is an implied narrative. And I'm the kind of person who, if I go and see a Trisha Brown concert or Merce Cunningham, there's always an implied narrative for me. Martha's famous for saying, the anecdotal story goes something like she was teaching a composition class and one of her students showed a study and another student said, oh, I get it, that was about this, that, and the other thing. And the young choreographer said, no, you're wrong, it's not about that at all. And supposedly, Miss Graham said, if someone sees something in your dance and you didn't intend for it to be there, it's still there.
And that's an important theory that many of us, you know, the intention of the auteur or the creator isn't necessarily what the dance is about or what the dance is open to.
And of course, somebody asked Mr. Cunningham once, we loved your concert, but we didn't understand it. What was your dance about? And supposedly, again, anecdotally, without missing a beat, he said the dance is about the dancing. So, time and space.
Yes. Or, yeah,
I was going to ask about corollaries with composers and music in general, because following on from the Merce comment, there's a very long history of the composer distancing themselves entirely from any intimation of expression, objective or subjective. The most famous being probably, I would say, Stravinsky. And I wonder whether, particularly because you're interested in dance, whether you looked into him. And that's all being, what's interesting about that, that's all being reconsidered today, because we're not entirely sure how much of what he wrote was from his own voice and how much was translated by...
Oh, we have an expert.
You're
You're
an
our partner.
expert.
Partner who's an expert in this.
So you can keep us up to date on what the you can keep us up to date on what the latest is. But he described any kind of intimation of expression from anybody as a phenomenon of speculation. That was his. Or
It
Robert
was-
Kraft.
So he was distancing himself from the intention of the work, that sort of thing. And
Either from others or from people ascribing to him any emotion.
well, you know, there's the whole thing about, you know, the art is the art, and it has its independence, and in music especially, but other things, and whatever the intention of the creator was, that's not what the art is about, or, you know, and then the story goes on. It represents things, and it can be seen independent of, you know, it used to be called, when I was in school, graduate school, intentional fallacy, that, you know, or the affective fallacy. That's when beauty is just in the arousal. That's the affective. So I think that's gone. You know, it's too far.
Yeah.
I think it takes the independence of the piece somewhat too far, is my view. And I get the reason why you wouldn't want to just impute the whole thing to be about the intention. But, you know, so famously Rothko said, you know, Mike says, you know, I call it refrigerators and freezers. You know, some of them have the freezer on the bottom and some have the freezer on the top. But he said they're about emotions. You know, and I kind of get that, the radiation of not of the cooling effects, but yeah, the colors are very much about that. I think that to me influences how I now see his work, and I think that it should be there should be something dynamic about my interaction, the audience interaction, and reading about it as a matter of, I mean, I'm so naive here, but just if I want to understand it as an object of understanding, I do much better if I know something about period, intent.
There are other instances like that, like with Schoenberg, who was very much into complete sort of abstraction. So you have all that period of 5 orchestral pieces where we remove any kind of programmatic element in the title. And the publisher comes along and says, oh no, actually it's called Summer Ballet. You know, and then everything, so it's published as Summer Ballet, and everyone thinks, oh, it's, you know, all the planets.
Yeah.
That's the most extraordinary thing.
Or what?
The planets, which sounds like space. But it was originally going to be 7 orchestral pieces, 7 pieces for large orchestras. So it's a question that composers historically, and you're right, I mean, I think there's a lot of rubbish going on in that I think it's become, why this desire to completely distance oneself from any kind of expression.
To let the art speak for itself, that sort of thing. Yeah, but it goes like that.
I mean, I took your main thoughts, two main thoughts. One is that expression is not an outpouring of felt emotion.
Right.
And the other one is that the modern dancers wanted to expand the expressive vocabulary by moving away from classical ballet. And there's a slight puzzle that comes up when you put those two things together, in my opinion, because tempting to think the expressive resources of any way of doing things is a matter of moving within the scale set by that mode of doing things. So if I wanted to pick fire, I don't have to use oil, I could use pastel. Indeed, I could do it in black and white action, with a Rembrandt. I don't need to go to bright colour to depict bright colour. I don't need to go to vivid expressive gesture to depict vivid expressive emotions. So how should we think about what I'm sure is true? The historical claim that they changed the vocabulary to express a wider range of emotions. But in a sense, everything could already be expressed with one vocabulary.
I don't think it's the only way that you could express a larger set of emotions. So if I claim that it was, a necessary condition for expressing a larger repertoire, I don't think it's the only way. I think it was one way, and in fact, then, thinking about aesthetic movements as reacting to others, and that way of thinking about theories of aestheticism sort of more dialectically, it did change the way ballet took itself and allowed for ballet that became more torso centric, if you might say, and not just extremities. So I don't think it was the only way. It was historical materialism, works here in a certain way. There was a lot going on to suggest that for dancers that this was a way to go, given especially in Europe, what was going on in ways of expressing oneself and interest in the East. But I don't think it's the only way. And I think that, as a historian, you would know better than I would. Would there have been a way with the traditional repertoire or lexicon of ballet to be able to express the sort of things that Lamone wanted to express using all that release? I don't know, but I don't think it's impossible. But this certainly expanded the repertoire and expanded, actually, it's become quite conventional. So postmodern dances, forget all these vaginal contractions. Let's just walk on stage.
Probably the only thing they were trying to achieve is they could achieve it other ways.
Could be the only thing they were trying to achieve. Well, they were certainly also trying to tell tragedies. It's a remarkable tellings of Clytemnestra, of Oedipus and the like. And again, I don't know if there are ballet examples comparable to that. And they probably also, as dancers, felt liberated. But
look, I think it's overdone, the whole separation between ballet and modern dance. It's over.
Yeah.
That's a product of now. And really, if you look at Balanchine's work, he did a lot of these things. He did work on things.
And he worked with,
He worked on Persephone, he worked on Don Quixote, he worked on Midsummer. He was deeply engaged in works that had a kind of, what you might call, and in types of movement that were at least as modern or different from ballet, even though they were being presented within the ballet vocabulary. Bausch started in ballet.
And she had ballet teachers regularly.
This kind of rigid, the sort of differentiation between the two is often, I think,
It's ideological war.
It's not untrue, but it's also reproducing.
It's simplifying.
Yeah, it's original, and it's reproducing a battle that was waged by them for political reasons that had nothing to do with aesthetic.
So I just wanted to add, or just from my own experience with ballet, when it comes to ballet and the expression of the intuitive self or the emotional, the spiritual self, and we talk about Balanchine and even in my experience with Forsyth. For me, what was interesting about that new formula was this improvisational element. And also the idea of the choreographer letting go of their own idea. So I think that what was interesting, what started to develop was, Bill would talk about going through something personal in his life and ask us how we felt about it, ask us to improvise, and then it would change the trajectory of the piece and become more of this kind of collaborative experience. And I think that for me also raised the spiritual stakes, so to speak, that I was able to really say how I felt and not have to be an instrument for someone else's emotional value or experience. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think that's what's interesting now, that we see even taking the ballet vocabulary and marrying, really the truth of how a dancer may respond to a step they're given, or even add or embellish or alter. I think it's an interesting thing, and it kind of gives more of this sense of empowerment to the artist in turn, and also investment of their own human experience to meet the choreographer. So it's interesting that, I just found that approach helped a lot in terms of raising the spiritual game.
Couple more, and then we're gonna
Yeah,
have to
please,
stop.
each of you. Yes,
Yeah.
Or Ed, you
I was remembering when Darwin went to first see Uriah Pan at the Louvre in about 1837, and he looked very carefully at her gestures, her muscles, and he said in his notebook that night, she has all the muscles that we have around the mouth. Why not the feelings too? And I was thinking of muscle, and rather as the forms of the language, so the form would be the muscle that lets you do something, and that perhaps what was happening at that time would be the evolution of the muscle, evolution of the forms. That the forms are the feelings at the same time. There's not an attraction. The one is the other. And anyway, when you're writing a poem, you hope that the form is going to be the feeling.
Yeah, so the abstraction drops out.
Yeah, because abstract
in the
comes from-
embodiment. Yeah.
Abstract comes from abtraho, meaning drag away. So it's dragging away from the feeling.
Yes, Annie.
I'm interested in your discussion how important it is or unimportant it is to you that you're only talking about the movement and not about the sort of other parts of the dancing, like the music.
I haven't gotten there yet, and I'm petrified.
Also, to some degree, what you were talking about with like titling or untitling or retitling pieces, like how much does it matter that the piece is called Lamentations and you go in knowing that, and then it has a soundtrack,
Cueing, yeah.
or the Rite of Spring, which you play to us from a documentary, so it's some sort of like
Yeah, it's fine.
music instead of yeah, because I don't know. To me, one of the most interesting things about modern dance and ballet is this meshing of sort of words and sounds and vision and muscle. How does that fit together?
I think you're absolutely right. Much dance is with music, and the music, then you have to have a theory of expression for music. I mean, that you think works.
Yeah.
Whether there's I mentioned contour theory, Kippy, or persona.
I share
idea, less.
Skepticism.
Yeah, a lot of it has been tried out. Or, it's just sort of congruent in some way, but then you're left to say congruent how. So resemblance theories always have a problem. So I agree, totally part of that, and, and I don't, dance without music, I don't know, people have to help me, but I don't like it. I mean, I don't like doing it without music, but I don't feel, music is definitely the thing that gets me singing, gets my soul singing.
No, it was just one tiny thing to connect. Have you looked at the organisations of orchestras with regard to the military? So I don't know if you know, but do you know how orchestral strings are referred to when a job application comes up? Rank and file. So it's a very interesting history all the way back, and really all the way back to Lully, and it's
The president's own.
Yeah, you might, it's a longer conversation to have
Yeah.
now, but I
Yeah.
absolutely encourage you to look at it. And Lily is an example of someone who I think did injure himself and killed himself conducting.
Who?
Jean Baptiste Lilly, but French
He
Baroque.
banged his foot after the man died.
So you could start there.
Okay, all right, well, I
No, no,
know, I'm gonna talk to you.
I just thought it'd be